Welcome to BL Story Tender. Please hit subscribe. Thank you very much. Let the story begin. Chapter 1. The Boy with Silver Eyes. The scent of cinnamon, roasted coffee beans, and fresh bread wrapped around Ethan Vale like a second skin as he wiped down the wooden counter inside Maple Street Books and Cafe. Outside, snow drifted softly across the sidewalks of Havenridge, coating the quiet town in silver and white. The cafe was warm despite the freezing January wind pressing against the windows, and the soft hum of jazz music mixed with the low conversations of customers turning pages beside steaming cups of coffee. Ethan liked mornings like this. Quiet mornings felt safe, predictable, no surprises, no memories, no Damian Cross. "Mommy, look!" A small voice called out from the children's corner near the bookshelf display. Ethan glanced up immediately, his entire expression softening at the sight of Noah sitting cross-legged on the rug with a picture book spread across his lap. The little boy's dark curls fell messily over his forehead as he pointed excitedly at a drawing of a snow fox. "It looks like Mr. Whiskers," Noah announced proudly. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe Mr. Whiskers finally found his long-lost cousin. Noah gasped dramatically before bursting into laughter so bright and innocent that several customers nearby smiled without meaning to. Ethan returned to wiping the counter, but his shoulders relaxed. Noah had that effect on people. The little boy carried warmth with him wherever he went. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly. Cold winter air swept inside. Ethan looked up automatically, and the world stopped. Damian Cross stepped into the cafe wearing a charcoal wool coat dusted with snowflakes, his broad frame commanding attention without effort. He looked exactly the same as he had 3 years ago. Sharp jawline, dark hair brushed neatly back, gray eyes colder than winter steel. The kind of man who looked more at home in the top floor of a skyscraper than inside a small-town bookstore cafe. Ethan's fingers tightened painfully around the dish towel. No. Damian should not have been here. The chief executive officer of Cross and Vale Holdings practically owned half the East Coast financial market. Men like Damian did not wander into tiny cafes, hidden in quiet towns 4 hours away from Manhattan. Panic rushed through Ethan so suddenly he nearly dropped the ceramic mug in his hand. Damian glanced toward the menu board with calm indifference, clearly unaware that the Omega standing behind the counter felt like his entire life was collapsing in slow motion. Ethan forced himself to breathe. Maybe Damian did not recognize him. It had only been one night. One drunken, blurry, impossible night 3 years ago during a New Year's gala in Manhattan. Ethan had disappeared before sunrise. Damian never saw him again. "Mommy!" Noah suddenly shouted happily. Ethan's blood turned cold. Before he could react, Noah jumped up from the rug and sprinted across the cafe floor directly toward Damian. The little boy stopped right in front of the Alpha and stared up at him curiously. Damian finally looked down. Silence fell over the cafe. Ethan could not move, could not breathe. Noah tilted his head slightly, studying Damian with innocent fascination. "You look sad," Noah said gently. Damian froze, completely. His gray eyes locked onto Noah's face with terrifying intensity. Ethan watched the exact moment the color drained from Damian's expression, because Noah's eyes were identical to his. The same silver-gray shade, the same shape, even the tiny mole beneath the left eye was there. Damian stared at the child like he had just seen a ghost step out of the past. Noah blinked innocently. "Mommy says staring is rude," he informed him seriously. A nearby customer laughed softly under their breath, but Damian did not react. He looked pale now, disturbed, almost frightened. Then Noah smiled, and Ethan saw the final crack form inside Damian Cross, because Noah smiled exactly like him too. Damian Cross did not move. The cafe around him faded into distant noise as he stared at the little boy standing inches away. Silver-gray eyes, dark curls. Even the stubborn tilt of the chin felt painfully familiar. It was like looking at a memory he had never lived before. Noah blinked up at him innocently, completely unaware of the storm gathering behind Damian's calm expression. Ethan forced his legs to move. "Noah!" he said quickly, his voice tighter than usual. "Come here, sweetheart." Noah turned immediately. "But Papa," he looked sad. Ethan's chest tightened painfully at the simple statement. Damian finally looked away from Noah and lifted his gaze toward Ethan. Their eyes met fully for the first time in 3 years. Ethan saw recognition hit him slowly this time. Not immediate. Not explosive. Worse, it spread across Damian's face piece by piece, like someone fitting together fragments of an old photograph. "You," Damian said quietly. Ethan swallowed hard. Hearing that voice again after 3 years felt dangerous. Deep, controlled, calm in a way that always made Ethan nervous. Damian's gray eyes narrowed slightly, as if replaying old memories inside his head. "New Year's Eve," he said at last. Ethan's fingers curled tightly around the towel in his hands. He hated that Damian remembered. Part of him had spent years convincing himself the alpha probably forgot everything the moment the sun came up. Men like Damian Cross did not remember strangers from drunken nights. Apparently he did. Noah looked between them curiously. "Papa? Do you know him?" Ethan opened his mouth, but Damian answered first. "I think you're Papa, and I met a long time ago." Noah seemed satisfied with that answer. "Oh." Then he smiled brightly at Damian again. "You should try the cinnamon rolls. Papa makes the best ones." Ethan nearly laughed from pure panic. Noah trusted people too easily. Damian looked at the little boy for another long second before finally straightening slightly. "I will keep that in mind." The strange tension inside the cafe slowly returned to normal as nearby customers resumed their conversations. But Ethan still felt trapped beneath Damian's gaze. It was impossible to tell what the alpha was thinking. That frightened him more than anger would have. Damian approached the counter at last. Calm, controlled, perfectly composed again. "Black coffee," he said. "No sugar." Ethan froze for half a second because that had been Damian's exact order 3 years ago at the Manhattan Gala. Damian noticed the hesitation. Ethan saw it in the subtle shift of his expression. The alpha remembered that too. "Right?" Ethan muttered softly before turning toward the espresso machine. His hands shook slightly while preparing the drink. He could feel Damian watching him the entire time. Noah wandered back toward the children's corner, thankfully distracted by another picture book. But Ethan knew this fragile piece could not last long. Damian was too observant, too intelligent. The alpha had built a billion-dollar empire before turning 32 years old. Men like him noticed patterns, and Noah looked too much like him. Ethan placed the coffee cup carefully on the counter. "That will be $4.75. Damian glanced at the cup but did not reach for it immediately. Instead, his eyes shifted toward Noah again. "How old is your son?" Ethan's heartbeat stumbled violently. There it was, the question he had dreaded for 3 years. 3, Ethan answered carefully. Damian's expression did not change, but Ethan noticed the slight tension in his jaw. 3, Damian repeated quietly. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a crisp $20 bill on the counter without looking away from Ethan. "Keep the change." Ethan hated how naturally powerful Damian still felt. Even standing inside a cozy little bookstore cafe, he carried the cold gravity of Manhattan boardrooms with him. Damian picked up the coffee at last. "I am staying in Havenridge for a few days," he said casually. Ethan immediately felt sick. "Business?" Damian looked at him steadily. "Something like that." Then Noah looked up from across the cafe and waved enthusiastically. Damian hesitated for the briefest moment before lifting one hand in return. The tiny gesture should not have meant anything. But Ethan saw the confusion in Damian's eyes as he walked toward the door, like some instinct inside him had already begun pulling him back toward the child. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan realized hiding Noah might no longer be possible. Snow fell steadily over Havenridge that night, covering the quiet streets in white while Ethan Vale stood alone in the tiny apartment above the bookstore cafe. The old radiator hummed softly near the window, fighting against the January cold creeping through the walls. Noah was asleep on the couch beneath a dinosaur blanket, one small arm wrapped around a stuffed fox while an animated movie played quietly on the television. Ethan stared down at his phone for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Unknown number. 3 missed calls. 1 message. He already knew who it was before opening it. We need to talk. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Of course, Damian Cross would not let this go. Men like Damian did not ignore unanswered questions, especially when those questions looked exactly like them. Ethan set the phone face down on the kitchen counter and rubbed both hands over his face. His entire body felt exhausted. 3 years. He had survived 3 peaceful years hidden away in this small town. 3 years of bedtime stories, early mornings, and learning how to build a quiet life from almost nothing. And now Damian had walked back into it in less than 10 minutes and shattered the fragile balance Ethan fought so hard to protect. A small, sleepy voice drifted from the couch. "Papa." Ethan immediately softened and walked over. Noah blinked up at him drowsily. "Are you sad?" Ethan sat beside him carefully and brushed dark curls away from the little boy's forehead. "No, sweetheart. Just tired." Noah studied him with suspicious seriousness that felt far too intelligent for a 3-year-old. "You make that face when bills come in the mail." Ethan laughed quietly despite himself. "Do I really?" Noah nodded. "And when the heater broke." Ethan sighed dramatically. "Okay, maybe I am a little worried." Noah scooted closer until he was pressed against Ethan's side. "About the tall guy?" Ethan's heartbeat stumbled again. Children noticed everything. "Why do you ask that?" Noah yawned softly before answering. "Because he looked at me funny." Ethan swallowed hard. Not funny. Shocked. Terrified. Like someone watching the impossible happen right in front of them. Ethan stared down at Noah's sleeping face after the little boy drifted off again a few minutes later. The resemblance had always been there. The silver-gray eyes. The sharp eyebrows. Even Noah's calm expressions sometimes looked painfully similar to Damian's. Ethan noticed it every single day. He just spent 3 years praying Damian never would. His phone buzzed again. Ethan hesitated before finally picking it up. Another message appeared. "I am outside." Ethan's stomach dropped instantly. He hurried toward the apartment window and carefully pulled back the curtain. A black luxury sport utility vehicle sat, parked across the snowy street, beneath a glowing street lamp. Damian leaned against the driver's side door wearing a dark wool coat, one hand tucked into his pocket while snowflakes drifted slowly through the cold night around him. Even from the second-floor window, Ethan could feel the alpha's patience. Calm, silent, unmoving, waiting. Ethan cursed softly under his breath. Damian was not leaving. 10 minutes later, Ethan quietly stepped outside after making sure Noah remained asleep upstairs. The freezing air bit immediately at his cheeks as he crossed the sidewalk. Damian watched him approach but did not speak right away. Up close, his expression looked more tired than Ethan remembered. "You should not be here," Ethan said quietly. Damian glanced toward the apartment window above the bookstore. "He is 3 years old." Ethan stiffened immediately. "Damian, 3 years old," Damian repeated calmly. "And he has my eyes." Ethan folded his arms tightly against the cold. "A lot of people have gray eyes." Damian looked directly at him then, and Ethan instantly regretted the weak lie. "Do not insult my intelligence." Silence stretched heavily between them while snow continued falling around the empty street. Finally Damian spoke again, his voice lower this time. "I checked the date after leaving the cafe." Ethan's pulse quickened painfully. Of course he did. Damian continued watching him carefully. The timing matches. Ethan felt suddenly cold in a way that had nothing to do with winter. "Damian, please." The alpha's expression shifted slightly at the word please. Softer. More dangerous somehow. "Did you really think I would never notice?" Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but Damian spoke again before he could. "There is something else." Ethan frowned slightly. Damian hesitated for the first time since arriving. "I have a severe almond allergy," he said quietly. Ethan froze completely. Damian's gray eyes darkened. At the cafe this morning, Noah asked if the cinnamon rolls contained almonds before he touched one. Ethan's blood ran cold. Only people with the Cross family allergy carry epinephrine injectors everywhere they go. Damian stared at him in silence for one devastating second. So tell me honestly, Ethan. His voice dropped lower. Why does your son have the same rare allergy my family has carried for generations? Chapter 2. The night he never forgot. Ethan could barely feel the cold anymore. Snow collected silently on the shoulders of Damian Cross's dark coat, while the quiet street between them seemed to disappear beneath the weight of the question hanging in the air. Why does your son have the same rare allergy my family has carried for generations? Ethan looked away first. His chest tightened painfully as memories he had spent years burying threatened to surface all at once. Manhattan, bright ballroom lights, champagne glasses, the scent of cedarwood and whiskey. Damian's hand brushing against his wrist on a crowded balcony, while fireworks exploded somewhere beyond the city skyline. Ethan forced himself back to the present before the memories swallowed him whole. You should leave, he whispered. Damian's jaw tightened slightly. That is not an answer. I do not owe you one. Damian studied him carefully for several long seconds. Maybe not, he said quietly. But if Noah is my son, then this stopped being only your decision 3 years ago. Ethan's pulse spiked instantly. Anger finally broke through the panic building inside him all night. Your decision? He repeated sharply. You think I wanted any of this? Damian frowned slightly at the sudden bitterness in Ethan's voice. Ethan laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You walked back into my life after 3 years and immediately started questioning me like I committed some kind of crime. Damian remained calm, but Ethan noticed the tension building beneath that control now. Then tell me what really happened. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. You do not even remember? Something unreadable flickered across Damian's expression. Ethan shook his head slowly. Of course you do not. The freezing wind pushed snow across the empty street while Ethan fought to steady his breathing. After that night, I tried to find you. Damian went completely still. Ethan continued before he lost the courage to say it. 2 months later, I found out I was pregnant. Even after preparing himself for the possibility, Damian visibly froze hearing the words spoken aloud. Ethan wrapped his arms tightly around himself against the cold. I went to your company headquarters in Manhattan. Damian stared at him silently now. Your security team would not even let me into the building. Ethan still remembered that day perfectly. The massive glass tower. Expensive marble floors. The receptionist politely asking him to leave while guards watched him like he did not belong there. Ethan swallowed hard. I told them I needed to speak with Damian Cross personally. His voice cracked slightly despite his effort to stay calm. They laughed at me. Damian's expression darkened immediately. I never knew. Ethan finally looked directly at him again. Exactly. The alpha looked shaken for the first time since arriving in Havenridge. Not angry. Not defensive. Just genuinely unsettled. Ethan hated how satisfying that felt. I was 22 years old. Ethan continued quietly. I had no money, no family support, and no idea how to raise a child alone. His throat tightened painfully at the memory. Do you know what terrified me most? Damian did not answer. Ethan gave a small bitter smile. Not the pregnancy. Not being alone. His eyes drifted toward the apartment window upstairs where Noah slept peacefully. I was terrified someone like you would take him away from me. Damian's entire posture shifted slightly at those words. Ethan saw it immediately. You keep talking about timelines and genetics and family allergies, Ethan said softly. But all I could think about back then was surviving long enough to protect my child. Silence settled heavily between them again. Snow continued falling around the empty street while distant headlights moved through downtown Havenridge several blocks away. Finally, Damian spoke, quieter this time. You really believed I would take him from you? Ethan laughed softly again, exhausted more than angry now. You are Damian Cross. That answer alone seemed to hit harder than anything else. Damian looked away briefly, toward the glowing bookstore windows behind Ethan. I searched for you too, he admitted unexpectedly. Ethan blinked in surprise. Damian's expression remained distant, almost frustrated with himself. You disappeared before sunrise. The hotel cameras were useless because half the guests left after midnight during the storm. Ethan's breath caught slightly. Damian had looked for him. The realization unsettled him more than it should have. I thought maybe you regretted everything, Damian admitted quietly. Ethan stared at him in stunned silence. 3 years. 3 years built on assumptions from both of them. Then a small sleepy voice suddenly called from the apartment window above them. Papa? Both men looked up immediately. Noah stood behind the glass, rubbing his tired eyes while clutching his stuffed fox against his chest. Then the little boy spotted Damian below and smiled sleepily. Oh, Noah mumbled happily. The tall guy came back. Noah pressed both hands against the apartment window, his sleepy smile completely unaware of the tension standing frozen beneath him in the snowy street. Ethan immediately stepped backward toward the bookstore entrance. Go back to bed, sweetheart, he called gently. Noah rubbed one eye with the sleeve of his pajama shirt. Can the tall guy come inside? It is cold. Ethan nearly choked on air. Damian looked down briefly, clearly hiding something dangerously close to amusement. Noah, Ethan warned softly. Bed. The little boy sighed dramatically, disappearing from the window a few seconds later. Ethan waited until the light upstairs dimmed before exhaling shakily. He likes you already, Damian observed quietly. Ethan shot him an exhausted look. Noah likes everyone. But even as he said it, he knew that was not entirely true. Noah was friendly, but careful around strangers. The little boy usually hid behind Ethan for days before warming up to anyone new. Yet after meeting Damian for less than 10 minutes, Noah had already invited him upstairs. That realization unsettled Ethan more than he wanted to admit. Damian glanced toward the bookstore entrance. Can we talk somewhere warmer? Ethan should have said no immediately. Instead, against every survival instinct he had built over the last 3 years, he unlocked the cafe door and stepped inside. Warm air wrapped around them instantly after the freezing street outside. The cafe looked softer at night. Dim hanging lights reflected against bookshelves and polished wood while the scent of cinnamon lingered faintly in the air. Damian removed his coat slowly, and Ethan suddenly remembered exactly how dangerous proximity to this alpha used to feel. Even now, Damian carried that same quiet gravity around him. Calm, controlled, impossible to ignore. Ethan moved behind the counter mostly to create distance. 5 minutes, he said firmly. Then you leave. Damian accepted the condition without argument, which somehow made Ethan more nervous. The alpha sat at one of the small corner tables near the window while Ethan busied himself cleaning an already spotless coffee machine. Silence stretched between them for several moments before Damian finally spoke. What is his full name? Ethan hesitated. Noah Vale. Damian leaned back slightly in his chair. Not Cross. Ethan looked at him sharply. You were not there. Damian accepted the hit without flinching. Fair enough. Ethan stared down at the coffee cups stacked beside the espresso machine. I was not trying to punish you, he admitted quietly. I just needed him to belong somewhere safe. Damian watched him carefully. And Cross does not sound safe to you. Ethan laughed softly under his breath. Your family owns newspapers, hotels, investment firms, and half of Manhattan. His eyes lifted toward Damian briefly. People like me disappear inside families like yours. Damian did not respond immediately. Instead, his gaze drifted slowly around the bookstore cafe. The handmade decorations, the children's reading corner, Noah's crayons scattered across a nearby table. He seems happy here, Damian admitted at last. Ethan softened despite himself. He is. That answer felt important somehow. Damian rested one arm against the table, studying him quietly. Does he know? Ethan frowned. Know what? About me. Ethan shook his head immediately. No. Damian's expression became unreadable again. Why? Ethan stared at him in disbelief. Because until yesterday, I was not even sure you would care. The honesty in that answer settled heavily between them. Damian looked genuinely affected by it. Before either of them could speak again, small footsteps suddenly echoed from the staircase upstairs. Ethan turned instantly. Noah stood halfway down the stairs wrapped in his dinosaur blanket, dark curls sticking messily in every direction. "I tried sleeping," he announced seriously. "But the heater is making monster noises again." Ethan sighed softly. "Come here." Noah shuffled the rest of the way down the stairs before stopping beside Damian's table. The little boy stared at him thoughtfully for several seconds. Then Noah climbed directly into the chair beside him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan opened his mouth in alarm, but Damian remained perfectly still. Noah tilted his head while studying him up close. "Your eyes are the same color as mine," he said matter-of-factly. Damian's entire body seemed to go rigid again. Noah continued innocently, "Papa says mine look like storm clouds." Ethan felt his stomach twist painfully. Damian swallowed once before speaking carefully. "Your papa is right." Noah smiled proudly. "I like storms." Damian stared at the child beside him with an expression Ethan could not fully understand anymore. Wonder, confusion, something softer beneath both. Then Noah yawned hugely before leaning sideways against Damian's arm without hesitation. The alpha froze completely as the little boy mumbled sleepily, "You smell warm." And for the first time since Damian Cross walked back into his life, Ethan saw real fear enter the alpha's eyes. Not fear of scandal. Not fear of responsibility. Fear of becoming attached. Noah fell asleep less than 10 minutes later with his small head resting against Damian's arm. His dinosaur blanket tangled around both of them awkwardly. Ethan stood frozen behind the counter watching the impossible scene unfold in front of him. Damian Cross looked completely out of place inside the tiny bookstore cafe, sitting beneath handmade paper snowflakes while a sleepy 3-year-old leaned trustingly against his shoulder. And yet somehow the image felt disturbingly natural. Damian barely moved, careful not to wake Noah. His gray eyes remained fixed on the child's face like he still could not fully believe this was real. Ethan slowly approached the table and crouched beside Noah carefully. "Come on, sweetheart," he whispered gently. "Time for bed." Noah stirred sleepily but tightened his grip on Damian's sleeve instead. "Warm," he mumbled. Ethan closed his eyes briefly in embarrassment. Damian looked equally startled by the tiny hand clutching his coat. For a long second, neither of them moved. Then Damian spoke quietly. "I can carry him upstairs." Ethan immediately looked up. "You do not have to." "I know." The calm answer unsettled Ethan more than pressure would have. Before he could protest again, Damian carefully lifted Noah into his arms with surprising gentleness. The little boy instinctively curled closer against his chest without waking fully. Ethan stared in silence while Damian carried Noah upstairs like he had done it 100 times before. Something deep inside Ethan twisted painfully at the sight. The apartment upstairs was small but warm, filled with children's books, folded laundry, and tiny signs of Noah everywhere. Damian paused near the hallway entrance while taking in the quiet details. Crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. Tiny sneakers beside the couch. A framed photo of Ethan and Noah smiling in front of a pumpkin patch last October. Ethan suddenly felt strangely exposed. Damian was seeing the life he had built without him. Noah shifted sleepily in Damian's arms as Ethan pulled back the blanket on the small bed tucked beside the apartment window. Damian lowered him carefully onto the mattress. For a moment, the alpha simply stood there watching the little boy sleep. Noah's dark curls spread across the pillow while snow reflected softly against the bedroom walls through the window. Damian looked shaken again. Ethan quietly adjusted the blanket around Noah's shoulders. "He talks in his sleep sometimes," he murmured softly. Damian glanced at him. "Does he?" Ethan nodded faintly. "Usually about dinosaurs or pancakes." The corner of Damian's mouth almost lifted. Almost. Then Noah suddenly mumbled something sleepy into the pillow. "Papa." Ethan immediately looked down. Noah shifted slightly before whispering again, "Do not cry." Ethan froze completely. Damian looked at him sharply. Silence filled the room. Ethan stared at the floor, unable to breathe properly for one terrible second. Noah had heard him crying before, more than once. Damian's voice softened unexpectedly. Ethan. Ethan shook his head quickly. Do not. Damian studied him carefully in the dim bedroom light. You went through all of this alone. Ethan laughed quietly under his breath, though it sounded exhausted more than amused. That was not exactly my original life plan. Damian looked toward Noah again. Why Havenridge? Ethan hesitated before answering. My mother grew up here. His voice softened slightly. After she passed away, she left me the bookstore downstairs. Damian absorbed that quietly. And you stayed. Ethan nodded. It was safe here. The word safe lingered heavily between them. Damian understood exactly what Ethan meant. Safe from Manhattan. Safe from the Cross family. Safe from him. A sudden vibration broke the silence. Damian pulled his phone from his coat pocket and glanced at the screen. Ethan immediately noticed the subtle shift in his expression. Colder now. Controlled again. Damian declined the call without answering. 2 seconds later, the phone buzzed again. Ethan frowned slightly. You should probably take that. Damian looked at the screen once more before slipping the phone back into his pocket. It can wait. Ethan was not convinced. Work emergency? Damian's jaw tightened slightly. Family. Ethan felt unease settle instantly in his chest. Before he could ask anything else, Damian's phone vibrated for the 3rd time. This time a message preview lit up briefly across the screen before disappearing. Ethan only caught a few words, but it was enough to make his stomach drop. We found the Omega. Damian immediately locked the screen. Too late. Ethan had already seen it. The entire room suddenly felt colder. Damian looked at him carefully, realizing exactly what Ethan had read. Ethan, he said quietly, but fear was already rising fast inside Ethan's chest again, because for 3 years he had only been hiding from one man. He had never stopped to consider what would happen if the rest of the Cross family found Noah too. Chapter 3. The heir they were looking for. Ethan could not sleep after Damian left. Long after the black sport utility vehicle disappeared from the snowy street below, he remained standing near the apartment window with his arms wrapped tightly around himself. Havenridge had always felt small and quiet in the safest possible way. Tonight, for the first time in 3 years, it felt exposed. Noah slept peacefully in the next room, completely unaware that strangers now knew he existed. Ethan glanced toward the hallway again before pulling the curtains shut. His pulse still had not settled. We found the Omega. The message replayed inside his head over and over again. Not Ethan. Not Noah. The Omega. Like he was a problem to locate. Like he was something connected to Damian instead of a person with a life of his own. Ethan barely slept 2 hours before morning arrived. By 7:30, he was downstairs preparing the cafe for opening while Noah colored dinosaurs at one of the corner tables. Snow still covered the sidewalks outside, though the storm had finally stopped sometime before dawn. Ethan jumped slightly when the bell above the cafe door rang earlier than expected. But instead of Damian, an elegant older woman stepped inside wearing a cream-colored winter coat and leather gloves. Everything about her radiated wealth so effortlessly that Ethan immediately felt uneasy. Her silver hair was pinned neatly back, and her gray eyes looked painfully familiar, the same eyes Noah had inherited. The woman's gaze moved slowly across the cafe before landing directly on Noah. Ethan's blood ran cold. Noah looked up curiously from his coloring book and smiled politely. Hi! The woman stared at him in complete silence. Then something almost fragile crossed her composed face. Good morning, she answered softly. Ethan stepped away from the espresso machine immediately. Can I help you? The woman finally looked toward him. Calm returned to her expression so quickly it was almost frightening. You must be Ethan Vale. Every protective instinct inside him sharpened instantly. Who are you? The woman removed one leather glove carefully before answering. Vivian Cross. Ethan's stomach dropped. Damian's mother. Noah looked between them curiously while swinging his legs beneath the chair. Papa. She has eyes like mine too. Ethan forced a tight smile toward Noah while panic climbed steadily up his spine. Vivian approached slowly, but her attention remained fixed on Noah in a way that made Ethan deeply uncomfortable. Not cruel. Worse, assessing, like she was trying to solve something important. "How old is he?" she asked quietly. Ethan crossed his arms immediately. "Why are you here?" Vivian finally met his eyes again. "Damian informed me there was a possibility." Ethan almost laughed from disbelief. "A possibility?" Vivian ignored the bitterness in his voice. "My son has never brought an omega to the attention of this family before." Ethan stiffened instantly. The attention of this family. The phrasing alone made Noah sound less like a child and more like a business situation. Noah suddenly climbed down from his chair and walked toward the pastry display near the counter. Vivian watched him carefully the entire time. Then Noah reached for a cookie package containing almond pieces. "Noah," Ethan said sharply. "Not that one." Noah paused immediately. "Sorry, Papa." Vivian went completely still. Ethan realized his mistake too late. The allergy confirmation changed everything. Vivian's gaze slowly returned to Ethan. "Interesting," she murmured softly. The cafe door opened again before Ethan could respond. Damian stepped inside quickly, snow still clinging to the shoulders of his dark coat. The moment he spotted his mother, his entire expression hardened. "I told you not to come here." Vivian remained perfectly calm. "And I ignored you." Damian moved directly toward Ethan and Noah without hesitation, placing himself slightly between them and Vivian. The protective motion happened so naturally that Ethan noticed it instantly. So did Vivian. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "You are already attached," she observed quietly. Damian's voice turned cold. "This is not a board meeting, Mother." Noah looked up at Damian with immediate excitement. "Tall guy." Ethan almost corrected him again before realizing Damian's attention softened instantly at the sight of the little boy running toward him. Noah stopped beside him and proudly held up his dinosaur drawing. "I made this one green because green dinosaurs are cooler." Damian stared down at the drawing for a brief second before taking it carefully. "I agree." Vivian watched the interaction silently, but something unreadable shifted behind her composed expression. Then she spoke words that made Ethan's blood turn cold. "He really is a cross." Silence slammed through the cafe instantly. Damian's jaw tightened. Ethan's breathing stopped completely, but Vivian was still staring at Noah with that same calm, terrifying focus. "The resemblance is undeniable," she said quietly. "Which means the board will find out soon enough." The atmosphere inside the bookstore cafe changed completely after Vivian Cross spoke those words. Even Noah seemed to sense the sudden tension thickening the air around the adults. The little boy slowly lowered his dinosaur drawing while looking between Damian and Ethan with visible confusion. Damian stepped forward immediately. "Mother," he said coldly, "you are leaving." Vivian remained calm beneath the sharp edge in his voice. "You are behaving emotionally. Because you walked into his home uninvited." Ethan froze slightly at the word home. Damian did not even seem to notice he had said it. Vivian's gaze shifted briefly toward Ethan before returning to her son. "The board has spent years preparing for your succession," she said quietly. "If Noah truly carries the cross bloodline, this situation affects far more than your personal feelings." Noah frowned at the unfamiliar conversation. "Papa, what is a bloodline?" Ethan forced himself to move despite the panic tightening his chest. He crouched beside Noah gently. "Just grown-up business talk, sweetheart." Noah looked unconvinced but nodded anyway. Damian's eyes remained fixed on his mother. "He is a child," he said sharply, "not a business asset." Vivian studied him carefully then. "You have already changed." Damian did not answer. The silence itself became an answer. Ethan noticed it too. The Damian Cross standing inside this cafe no longer looked like the distant alpha from Manhattan boardrooms. Every time Noah moved, Damian's attention followed instinctively. Protective, alert, attached. Vivian noticed everything. That frightened Ethan more than open hostility would have. Finally, She reached into her handbag and removed a slim white envelope. Your grandfather requested a deoxyribonucleic acid confirmation immediately, she said calmly. Ethan's stomach dropped. Noah looked up curiously at the long, unfamiliar phrase. Damian's expression darkened instantly. No. Vivian lifted one eyebrow slightly. Damian. I said no. For the first time, tension cracked through Vivian's perfect composure. You do not seem to understand the seriousness of this situation. Damian stepped closer, his voice turning dangerously quiet. No, you do not understand. The cafe fell completely silent. Ethan had the strange feeling Damian was no longer speaking only to his mother. Noah stays out of cross-family politics, Damian continued. No lawyers, no board members, no investigators showing up at his school or home. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. You are making emotional decisions. Damian laughed softly under his breath, though there was no amusement in it. That family made enough cold decisions already. Something flickered across Vivian's expression then. Brief, almost guilty. Ethan noticed it immediately. Before he could think too deeply about it, Noah tugged gently on Damian's sleeve. Are you mad? Damian looked down instantly, his entire expression softening with almost frightening speed. No. Noah studied him carefully with serious storm-gray eyes. You look mad. Damian exhaled quietly before crouching slightly to Noah's level. I am just trying to make sure nobody bothers you. Noah considered that answer carefully for a moment. Then he smiled. Okay. Ethan's chest tightened painfully watching the interaction. It was happening too fast. Noah already trusted Damian naturally, and Damian was responding in ways Ethan doubted even he fully understood yet. Vivian observed the scene silently before finally turning toward the cafe door. The board will not ignore this for long, she warned quietly, especially after they learn why Noah matters. Ethan's pulse stumbled. Damian's expression changed instantly. Mother. But Vivian was already reaching for the door handle. She looked back one final time, her gaze landing directly on Noah. The Cross males have carried infertility for 2 generations, she said softly. Damian was never supposed to have children. Silence shattered through the cafe like breaking glass. Ethan stared at Damian in shock. Noah blinked in confusion. And for the first time since arriving in Havenridge, Damian Cross looked genuinely terrified. 3 weeks later, snow covered Havenridge in soft white layers, while warm golden lights glowed across downtown for the annual winter festival. Children laughed near the skating rink in the center of town. Music drifted softly through the cold evening air, and the scent of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon filled the streets. Ethan stood near the bookstore entrance wrapping Noah's scarf more tightly around his neck, while the little boy bounced excitedly in place. Papa, hurry! Noah complained dramatically. They are giving out free hot chocolate. Ethan laughed quietly. You already had 1 cup. That was 30 minutes ago. Before Ethan could answer, a familiar black sport utility vehicle pulled up beside the sidewalk. Noah's face lit up instantly. Tall guy. Damian stepped out into the snow wearing a dark wool coat and leather gloves. But the sharp coldness that once surrounded him had changed over the last few weeks. Havenridge had softened him in ways Ethan never expected. Or maybe Noah had. Damian walked toward them carrying a paper bag from the bakery across town. Extra cinnamon rolls, he explained before Noah could ask. Mrs. Carter made too many. Noah gasped like this was the greatest news of his life. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. You are spoiling him. Damian glanced toward Noah before answering quietly. I know. Ethan still had not fully adjusted to this version of Damian Cross. The man who now spent weekends building snow forts behind the bookstore. The man who attended preschool winter concerts without missing a single performance. The man who officially resigned from the Cross Succession Board 5 days ago. The entire financial world nearly exploded after the announcement. Damian had simply walked away from the empire his family spent decades preparing him to inherit. Ethan still remembered the argument that followed. Vivian Cross standing inside the cafe looking genuinely stunned while Damian calmly informed the board through speakerphone that he would not allow Noah to become part of their political games. For the first time in his life, Damian chose something over the Cross legacy. He chose them. Noah suddenly grabbed Damian's hand without hesitation. "Come on," he demanded happily. "The ice dragon sculpture is melting." Damian allowed himself to be dragged across the snowy street while Ethan followed behind them slowly. The sight still felt unreal sometimes. Noah stood between them bundled in winter clothes while tiny snowflakes caught in his dark curls. He looked happy, safe, loved. That mattered more than anything else now. The festival lights reflected softly across the frozen pond near the town square as Noah proudly explained every snow sculpture to Damian with complete seriousness. Damian listened to every word like it was important. At some point during the evening, Noah grew sleepy from too much excitement and too much hot chocolate. Damian lifted him easily into his arms while the little boy rested his head against his shoulder. "Tired?" Damian asked quietly. Noah nodded sleepily. "But happy." Ethan's chest tightened softly at the answer. They walked back toward the bookstore beneath falling snow and glowing winter lights. The entire town looked peaceful tonight. Safe again. When they reached the apartment stairs, Damian suddenly stopped. Ethan looked at him in confusion. Damian adjusted Noah carefully in his arms before speaking quietly. "I spent 3 years thinking something was missing from my life." His gray eyes lifted toward Ethan steadily. "Now I know it was both of you." Ethan's breath caught slightly. Damian continued before he could look away. "I cannot change the years I lost." His voice softened. "But I would like every year after this one." Silence settled gently between them while snow drifted softly through the quiet street. Then Damian stepped closer. "No more hiding," he said quietly. "No more running from each other." Ethan looked at Noah sleeping peacefully against Damian's shoulder before finally answering. "Okay." Relief crossed Damian's face so openly that Ethan nearly smiled. Then Noah stirred sleepily in Damian's arms and mumbled against his coat. "Night, Dad." Everything went still for one perfect second. Damian froze completely while Ethan felt tears sting unexpectedly behind his eyes. Noah had never called anyone that before. The little boy was already asleep again seconds later, completely unaware of what he had done. Damian looked down at him with an expression Ethan would never forget for the rest of his life. Wonder, love, fear, gratitude, all at once. Outside, snow continued falling softly over Havenridge while inside the warm little apartment above the bookstore cafe. For the first time in years, none of them felt alone anymore.